Kia ora, I'm Chelsea Daniels, and this is The Front Page, a daily podcast presented by the New Zealand Herald. New Zealand's energy sector is broken. That's according to an open letter calling for the government to do more to keep our power prices down. Soaring power costs is always a concern, but we now live in a country where for some, it's a privilege to have power. We've heard too many stories about businesses closing due to rising costs of just keeping the lights on, and everyday Kiwis are struggling as well. Tens of thousands of households are cut off from basic essential services just because they can't afford to pay their bills. So what can we actually do to keep prices down over winter? And can we ever get them to stay down permanently? Today on The Front Page, as part of the Herald's Power to the People campaign, we speak to the manager of Consumer NZ's Powerswitch, Paul Fuge. So Paul, Consumer NZ was part of this open letter calling for reforms in the energy sector. Why is the sector broken?
That's a really big question. Bottom line is we haven't seen enough investment in generation. So we have seen some, but not enough. And really it's because there's some structural issues in the market that have not been addressed. The current market structure basically incentivises just-in-time investment and being a little bit late rather than a little bit early. That's because scarcity is rewarded in terms of high prices and sort of high profits for gentailers. And one of the things we've observed in the market is that the price of electricity has been decoupled from the cost of actually producing it. So the cost of electricity, the forward prices of electricity are currently well above the long run cost of building new power stations and have been since 2019. And that's a good sign that the market isn't delivering the sort of outcomes that you'd expect from a competitive market.
Are gentailers meant to give a shit about how much we pay? Like legally, do they have to, can they hold on to their profits and not build new generators because they're getting away with us spending loads?
Well, there's no requirement on them. It's a free market. There's no requirement on them to build new generation. Gentailers will act, and according to the incentives put in front of them. So they've got a fiduciary requirement to deliver maximise shareholder return, right? And that's what they're required to do. And so they will make those decisions and make those investments according to those rules. So what we would say is, if you don't like the outcomes, don't blame the players, change the rules of the game. If this was a game of rugby and you didn't like how the game was being played, you'd change the rules. You wouldn't blame individual players for the way they're playing because they're just trying to play to the rules as they are required to do. So I think it's not helpful to just simply beat up retailers or gentailers as kind of villains. They are just doing what they are required to do and according to what the incentives put in front of them. So we would say change those incentives.
Right. So what should we change those incentives to?
So we think there needs to be some changes to the market. So firstly, we think markets are good for consumers. A thriving competitive market will provide consumers with choice, innovation, and help keep a lid on prices. So those are outcomes we're not seeing from this market. So obviously the market isn't delivering according to what it was intended. So we would say change the rules of that market. So one of the things we would say is you need to levelise the playing field. What we observe is some of the independent generators, this is the pure retailers, and who are quite innovative, tend to have higher customer service levels and tend to have lower prices, have really struggled to get a foothold in this market. And we've actually seen the market condense somewhat more recently. And in fact, if you look at the market concentration, the top 4 generators and their subsidiaries have around 86% of the market share. And that's the same as it was 10 years ago, which is quite remarkable. And that's not a great sign that this is a market that's working well for consumers. Some of these new innovative retailers have really struggled to gain a foothold. Even retailers that have been really successful overseas, like Octopus Energy, have really struggled to come into the New Zealand market. And primarily it's because they're struggling to compete with the gentailers because they can't procure electricity, or what they say is on equal terms as the people they're competing against. So that's quite a major structural flaw in the market. So that's something that the government should be looking at with urgency.
How bad are prices at the moment, and how have they gotten real bad over the last year?
Yeah, so we've seen about 10 to 11% increase from the same time last year on average across the country. That varies significantly. The price of electricity is a funny thing. There's no price of electricity in New Zealand. There's literally thousands and thousands of prices. But on average across the country, we've seen an 11% increase from last year. So that's not great. As a result, our latest survey, 36% of consumers have lost faith in the electricity market, or that it's delivering positive outcomes for them. That's not a great sign when close to 40% of people just don't think it's working.
Know this from me. We can no longer maintain regional robustness unless we have affordable energy, not just for mums and dads, but for employers and employees. I've championed this issue. I've endeavoured to get out in front of this issue because it's haunted Kiwis for too long, and we need to put the underlying security, the underlying well-being of all New Zealanders ahead of the short-term gentailer corporate riddle profits.
What can be done to make sure that those smaller players can get into the game? And can you explain it to me as if I am, I don't know, like a 5-year-old child or something? So gentailers are the ones producing and selling, whereas you've got other companies who are trying to get a good wholesale price and then sell it on to us.
That's correct. So retailers basically procure electricity on the electricity market. So and they're sort of basically hedging themselves. So they're basically buying on the wholesale market like other products and then selling on the retail market. So they have to procure enough electricity in the wholesale market to cover their customers' needs, both now and into the future. The problem in New Zealand is they're buying that electricity from the very people they're competing against.
Okay.
And you can imagine the disadvantages that and the risks that puts you under, and also the skullduggery that could go on, because the temptation for a gentailer will be to sell to its own retail arm at more favourable rates or in more favourable conditions than these independents who are trying to compete with them. So
can we make that illegal?
Big flaw. Well, what we'd say there is just have greater separation between the retail and generation functions, so that the independents can compete on the same terms as these larger retailers, and that's the fundamental flaw in this market.
Right. So if I was a gentailer and I was creating my energy and then selling it to people, I can sell it to my mate for $2, but all of these guys over here have to pay $3. Basically, they're working off a mate's rates system.
Well, that's the suspicion, and that's what independent retailers say, and that's I'd say there's some evidence for that. And so what you can do is your retail arm can operate at a loss or at a break-even point, but you more than make up for it on your generation arm, and that's not a luxury that's available to independents who are just living and dying basically on the retail part of it, and so obviously they can't compete. It's more complex because these innovative retailers are sort of looking for different types of hedges that they're offering more time of use products. So it's not just the rates; it's also the time of the day that they're trying to buy electricity as well.
How about a world where can we create more energy?
Well, that's what's neat. Fundamentally, what's driving the high energy prices is scarcity. So there's a lack of energy, and also there's the risk to it is that there's a fear that there will be a lack of energy in the future. So New Zealand's electricity system is a fantastic thing, highly renewable though. So we really are at the vagaries of weather, and so when it doesn't rain, we don't get enough snow, the price of electricity can get high because there's not enough energy in the system, and so we need to have almost like an overcapacity to accommodate those dry years. And the current sort of system doesn't really allow for an oversupply of electricity because power stations are very expensive to run, and you don't want to have a power station, if you've invested in one sitting there idle. So that's a real flaw in the system, is that the physical nature of New Zealand's system doesn't lend itself easily for the current market structure, and as a result, we've sort of lurched from energy crisis to energy crisis. I mean, we've had three energy crises since 2020. So it's sort of not a great way to run an economy because electricity is so essential to not just households, the health and well-being of households, but also for the functioning of the New Zealand economy, right? And this is the problem now, is prices become elevated for so long, it's actually affecting the economy, because there's businesses now that are sort of curtailing production or shutting down completely. And that's what's really got the attention, I think, of this government, is it's sort of becoming a risk to the New Zealand economy now.
Why hasn't anything been done about this? Is it just too hard?
Yeah, I think it's just been, they've kicked for touch. Successive governments, have tinkered around the edges with this, but no one's been prepared to make the consequential reforms or changes that are needed to sort of arrest this. So, we've given it a good go. It's been 25 years since we've put the retail market in, and we've had several crises in that time. The writing's been on the wall for a while now that things have gone a bit awry. Like I said, since 2019, the prices have been above the cost of production. So, as the open letter sort of said, the time for tinkering's over. We need consequential reform and change in this market to sort of get it working as it was intended to be working.
So what can the government do tomorrow to help us all out?
Well, there's a few things, like some simple things that would really help consumers. I mean, we've talked about the level playing field, but some of the basic things that we haven't got right in New Zealand is something we've been saying for decades, basically, is just, for a start, make power bills so people can understand them. Sounds a bit trite to say it, but 1 in 5 people don't even bother opening their power bill. People are just bamboozled by their power bills. People might be surprised to know that New Zealand's quite unique and that our power bills aren't standardised at all. What's on a power bill, what information is shown, and how it's shown, it varies between retailers. Now, it's a real flaw because people just can't understand their own power bill and own power usage, and even knowing that's normal. And what that does is create confusion and apathy and mistrust. And people have become disengaged from this market. And when you've got a market where people disengage from it, it's never going to function properly. So it's such a simple, easy, low-cost, non-controversial thing to do, right? Is just make power bills easy to understand. Electricity is sort of analogous to petrol. So when you think about how they show petrol prices, you can drive down the road in your car and through a random town, look at the windscreen of your car and look at the sign on the petrol station, and that's a good or bad price. But if you think, petrol is complex, it's dangerous, it's difficult supply chain, complex supply chains, etc. So it's similar to electricity. So how come they can show the price of petrol in a way that everyone can understand it in an instant? Yeah, electricity prices, people are just completely bamboozled by it. And also access to data. So we invested in New Zealand, big success story in electricity smart meters over a decade now. We're over 90% penetration in smart meter rollout. And these offer huge potential for consumers, but we've locked that data away. And so we run Powerswitch, for example. So we struggle to help consumers as much as we could if we were able to access that data, and other people as well access that data. So it's a real own goal, the smart meter thing, is that we've invested in this amazing technology, but we haven't unlocked the potential benefits to consumers from that because we just haven't enabled access to that data. And that's been an ongoing thing for more than a decade. And that's a real problem, but also it's a real frustration and something that would really help consumers that sort of hasn't been enabled for such a long time.
And I suppose if making bills easier to read, because I put my hand up, I'm one of those people who goes, $60 last month, $90 this month. Okay. But I suppose if you understood how and why it works, you'll have better options when it comes to perhaps switching companies as well. Should people be doing that more, and are we not doing it enough?
Well, exactly, and that was what would drive change as well if consumers basically started changing en masse, and that's what we're trying to get happening with our Powerswitch service. So we've had some success in that. Like we've seen massive upswing in site usage over this year. So in June we saw the largest number of initiator switches ever on the site, and it was more than double the previous highest month, which is astonishing. We've put invested in an AI bill reader now, as I talked about before, that people find bills confusing. So we've built this tool that can read any power bill in New Zealand, all the different variations, and take that information and feed it into our calculator and give people really faster, more accurate comparisons that are more compelling. So people who upload their bill are twice as likely to change providers than those who don't. So this is a real game changer, because the issue we've had is, like I said, getting the data into the model, and it's been difficult because A, we don't have access to the smart meter data, but B, because people can't read their power bill and are able to enter their own data. We can do that for them now with this AI bill reader. So this is the first thing we're doing, and then we're going to build some additional tools, AI tools, basically to help people with their power bill more. One of the things you said is like, is my power bill normal? So just tell people through the AI bill reader is what they're paying sort of normal for their household circumstances. Is it more than their neighbours? How much could they save if they changed, that sort of thing? What if they change their behaviour? What if they change their appliances? So this is the first step in what could be quite a revolution in retail. So we're really excited about it. And what we're finding, people on the site are really excited as well, because it's been such a high uptake of that tool. But in general, people can save between $400 and $500 by changing provider. A lot of people aren't aware of that just how much money they can save by changing plan or provider. A year, that's right. So that's a significant part of your bill. That's about the level at which people will change provider. So we have seen people respond to that. We'd like to see more.
These companies are making huge profits. They can reduce their prices. So again, I ask you, what will you do to come hard on these big companies?
Well, we have an electricity market review happening, which Simeon Brown is kicking off, and we'll look into that and we'll monitor that. But I just say to you, you also need those companies to be profitable, because they have to go make big investments in actually new renewable energy facilities and production facilities in order to be able to make sure that we double the amount of renewables we're going to get in the next few years, as well as we have to work really hard to find a new supply of gas and make sure that we've got gas in the market too.
A review into the energy sector was announced in November last year. What are we at? End of July now. What do you hope that reveals? And are we moving quickly enough here?
No, we're not. And hence the open letter is that we've been tinkering for too long. Some of the stuff we've seen coming out is they're not bad things in themselves, but I liken it to, some of these, the initiatives that are coming out from the Electricity Authority, for example, are sort of, they're not consequential enough for the crisis we find ourselves in. So I likened it to saying they're consulting on, the colour of the kitchen cabinets when the house is on fire. That's what it feels like. So it's nice that they're asking us what colour the kitchen cabinet should be. It's not a bad thing. But what we would say is the house is on fire. You should probably be looking at that first. And so some of these initiatives around increasing solar buyback, making retailers offer time of use prices, these are good things. There's no doubt that we wouldn't say they're bad, but they're not the things that they should be focusing on, because we've got people who are going cold. They're turning off their hot water cylinders. 11% of people say they can't heat their homes because it's too expensive. That's the real crisis, rather than sort of rewarding people who are fortunate enough to be able to afford solar systems. I'm one of those people. Helping them shouldn't be a priority.
Thanks for joining us, Paul.
No problem.
That's it for this episode of The Front Page. You can read more about today's stories and extensive news coverage at nzherald.co.nz. The Front Page is produced by Ethan Sills and Richard Martin, who is also our editor. I'm Chelsea Daniels. Subscribe to The Front Page on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts, and tune in tomorrow for another look behind the headlines.